Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to completely deconstruct the mechanics, the deployment, and the strict operational guardrails of AI facial recognition technology. Now, speaking from a law enforcement perspective, I've seen a lot of tools come and go over the years, but what we're looking at today, it's a total paradigm shift. We're going to break down exactly how this tech functions out in the field, the absolutely staggering capabilities it hands over to investigators, and crucially, the very real legal boundaries we've got to navigate to use it responsibly. You know, top brass, like Scotland's Chief Constable Joe Farrell, are already signaling that deploying this kind of technology, it's really no longer optional for modern investigative work. Look, when a tool comes along that people are calling the biggest breakthrough in crime detection since DNA testing, ignoring it isn't plain it's safe. It's actually actively leaving cases unsolved. Leadership across major agencies is realizing that to effectively protect the public today, we absolutely have to integrate these systems into our standard operating procedures. And the operational stakes here are basically defined by this one staggering metric, 99.85%. Top-tier algorithms can now pick a suspect out of a 12 million image lineup with near-perfect accuracy. And here's the real kicker for those of us actually working the streets. This accuracy holds up regardless of demographics, different weird camera angles, or even partial facial coverings. Get this, during the pandemic, developers literally photoshopped masks onto training images, and the AI just adapted. It's now demonstrably more accurate than the human eye. So our case file for today covers 5 critical areas. We've got the ultimate detective tool, the forensics of facial AI, the Clearview breakthrough, our rules of engagement, and finally, the privacy pushback. All right, Section 1, the ultimate detective tool. Let's open the file on how this completely shifts our capabilities from traditional methods over to modern deep learning. To really appreciate what we have today, we kind of have to look back at where we started. Older algorithms from back in the 1970s tried to measure the literal physical distance between a suspect's eyes, their nose, and their eyebrows. And well, if the security camera caught them at a bad angle, the whole system just failed. But modern neural networks are completely different. They use supervised machine learning. By feeding the system millions of labeled photos, imagine, say, 100 pictures of Brad Pitt, taken over 20 years with different haircuts and sunglasses. The AI learns the mathematical constants of a face. It figures out what literally stays the same across decades and angles. Moving into Section 2, the forensics of facial AI. To use this properly in the field, we really need to understand the underlying forensics. You can't just blindly trust a black box. You have to know how the machine processes a face in a chaotic environment. The forensic process breaks down into 4 rapid, highly technical stages. Step 1 is classification. The system scans a noisy scene, like a packed street, and just detects that a face is present. Step 2, it draws a bounding box to isolate that specific face from all the background clutter. Step 3 is normalization. Here, the AI strips away variables that cause inaccuracies, it adjusts the lighting, fixes the alignment, and usually turns the image to grayscale. And finally, Step 4, the absolute most critical part of the whole operation, vectorization. So what is vectorization? Well, this is basically the chain of custody for digital identity. The AI extracts the key features of a physical face and translates them into a unique mathematical string of numbers. So when you're looking at a suspect's face on your screen, the computer isn't seeing a picture, it's just looking at raw math. And computing chips can instantly check that numerical string against millions of encoded numbers on a wanted list to find a match. It's incredibly fast. Okay, Section 3, the Clearview breakthrough. Let's shift our focus and see how this actually plays out in real-world field operations. This technology is a massive force multiplier for detectives. Just look at the operational track record. Back in 2019, Homeland Security had this child abuse video. The only clue? A blurry male face in the background for just a couple of frames. They ran it through the neural network, and it matched to a public social media post tagged in Las Vegas that actually showed his employer. That single lead resulted in a search warrant, the rescue of a 6-year-old victim, and a 35-year felony conviction. Or take Latin America. Investigators ran their absolute hardest unsolved missing children files. In just 3 days, they made 110 identifications and rescued over 50 exploited kids. Just incredible results. And the scale of this deployment is just unprecedented in law enforcement history. We are talking about over 2 million searches conducted by agencies globally. This isn't just for, local convenience store robberies. It's estimated to have helped solve hundreds of thousands of crimes. It's even being used right now in active combat zones. Ukrainian authorities have used this exact tech to identify suspects in over 2,000 war crimes that otherwise would have remained totally anonymous.
Which brings us to Section 4, Rules of Engagement. Because with that kind of unparalleled power, we absolutely need strict chain-of-command protocols.
To prevent systemic abuse, deployment requires some serious safeguards. Step 1 is vetting. Access is restricted strictly to vetted government and law enforcement agencies, meaning we deliberately lock out hostile nations or bad actors. Step 2 is mandatory administrator audits. Before an investigator can even hit the search button, they have to input a specific case number and crime type to leave a permanent audit trail. And step 3 is actually my favorite. It's a built-in blind spot. If the algorithm is over 98% confident in a match, it actually hides that percentage from the user. Why? To force human investigators to do the manual detective work and verify the intelligence themselves. And that reinforces a core principle every single investigator has to remember. AI outputs are operational leads. They require traditional corroborating evidence. They are not instant convictions. You still have to do the actual police work. You still have to go out, get the warrants, build the case, and prove it in a court of law. Finally, Section 5, the privacy pushback. Because a good investigator respects the law, and we cannot operate effectively without public trust. We have to seriously examine the operational guardrails demanded by civil liberties advocates. Watchdogs like Big Brother Watch point out a massive legal reality we have to acknowledge. When police deploy live facial recognition cameras on a busy street, they are practically entering every single civilian who walks past into a continuous, involuntary digital police lineup. It's a real-time biometric scan of public space, checking ordinary everyday citizens against watch lists in fractions of a second. And the core legal friction really stems from this staggering number, 30 billion. That is roughly the number of images that some of these algorithms have scraped from the public internet. We're talking social media, blogs, news sites, all scraped to build these databases and all done without explicit individual consent. While law enforcement might see it as building the ultimate suspect database, privacy advocates argue it's an unregulated extraction of highly sensitive biometric data. To them, it's akin to secretly collecting DNA from everyone walking down the street. Critics warn that without aggressive legislative regulation, we're facing some really serious risks here. There's the argument that mass scanning reverses the legal presumption of innocence. Plus, there are real-world consequences to getting it wrong. We've already seen instances, like in Croydon, where misidentifications led to innocent people being unjustly stopped and questioned by police. And then there's the danger of mission creep. If we normalize this in policing, does it bleed into the private sector? Employers using bossware to snoop on gig workers, or schools requiring a facial scan just for a kid to get a lunch tray? So as professionals, we're faced with a really profound reality. The widespread adoption of what is arguably our ultimate detective tool could effectively end something society has always just taken for granted: the right to walk outside unmonitored. Facial recognition binds us to our digital history out in the physical world, fundamentally altering the very nature of public space. As we close out this briefing, I want to leave you to weigh this operational paradox. On one hand, we've got a tool that can pull child predators out of the shadows and solve decades-old cold cases in a matter of days. But on the other hand, we face the permanent erosion of public anonymity. So how do we balance the absolute duty to solve heinous crimes against the fundamental rights of the citizens we're sworn to protect? It is without a doubt the most critical question facing modern policing today. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.